Hello and welcome to Chesapeake Technology Incorporated's training video series. This one is on how to import side-scan sonar data into your SonarWiz 6 project. So we're going to be doing some of the same import functions in side-scan data that you had seen in previous webinars, but we'll do them with SonarWiz 6. Side-scan is probably the most popular license for SonarWiz, and when you buy a side-scan license, I'll show you in the post-processing import option here, there are many types of files that you can import. It shows in the list here when you select from the files type. Look at that, all of those different types of files are importable with one side-scan license. So it's a terrific license to have. All of the side-scan data comes in whether you have an inexpensive model like a Hummingbird, for example, and you're just getting standard starboard and port data from a pair of channels. Those are considered two channels. To the more expensive model of a high-end EdgeTech 4200, where you might have 4 channels of data coming in, 2 channels starboard and port, low frequency, 300 kilohertz, and maybe 650, 900 kilohertz, high frequency, channels 3 and 4. So all of this data is typically stored within a single file, a Sonar file, and we're going to show you how to import that. When you do import separate high and low frequency data from a single file, you'll import twice. You'll import the low frequency, for example, first, and the high frequency second. We're going to be following the workflow for side-scan post-processing that's described in our user guide, and I'll show you how to pull that up. We're going to open the Help and User Manual, and I will click on Control F, and I'll say Workflow to review what we're doing today. I'll click on Next to find section 1.6.2. And the section that we're interested in is thinking about what has happened in the project so far. If you watched our previous SonarWiz video on creating a project, you're all set. You've got a project location. You set up your default parameters in there. And the next steps that we do, section 3, section 4 here, we're going to be showing you how to load a base map. It's really cool to have a nautical base map chart underneath your data to show it in context. And the client sometimes wants that. If you export data, they might not want the base map there, so we'll show you how to turn the base maps on and off. This is well described really in section 3 of your user guide too. There's a whole section on base map import. And I don't want to go into too many redundant details here, but we'll just give an overview of how to do this so it seems familiar the first time you try it yourself. The main section we'll focus on then after base maps is importing side-scan data. And you can see in our workflow that would happen after you put in a base map. Usually you have the side-scan sonar data showing on top of the base map. That's what they call a base map. Or you might bring in an overlay of an outstanding area of regions, quadrants, areas that are defined by someone else that they say survey within this area. You might bring that in as an overlay, as a shapefile of various colors that show on top of your side-scan data. So it's a little bit like ArcGIS, ArcMap, where you can have really clearly, easily 3 layers of display data and turn them on and off in your SonarWiz map view. Base map, sonar data, and an overlay. And you can have many of each. You don't have to have just one. You can have a number of base maps, a number of overlays. And when you bring in side-scan data, I want to recommend that you think about the number of lines that you're bringing in. We have at our support site, SonarWiz 5 and SonarWiz 6 have frequently asked questions documents. And one of the popular topics for people is, how big should my side-scan project get? What if I have 1,000 lines, 2,000 lines? Will they all fit? And it's really up to you, but it definitely becomes a project management issue when you try to bring in too much side-scan data and look at it all at once. So you can look at small portions of a project and divide it up in the Project Explorer, maybe 50 to 100 lines per section, and display one section at a time. And if you manage your project that way, you could have lots of side-scan data in one project. Typically it's all within one geographic area though. I'll tell you one example is trying to show all of your lines over the entire surface of Lake Champlain. This is a big project. We have one of our customers doing that project. It's sub-bottom. But there are between 600 and 700 lines, and it doesn't all show up really well at once. But if you look at a small section at a time, you can manage that. Okay, so you're using the workflow. You're going to do the base maps first and then import your data. So let's look at our project. I'll show you how we set this up like in the previous video. Setting up a project. We've got a project name. Our location is the San Francisco Bay. We have some data that was collected in 2007. It's XTF format. Now there are a number of different ways that we describe how to import data. There's a really excellent section in the user manual. So I'll pull it up and see if we can find where you would look. I'll tell you just as a clue, importing side scan data is section 5.3. So it's easy to look for 5.3. And let's find that. Oh, that's base map first. And the next one, okay, importing side scan data. So when we start importing side scan data, this is a good section to just review. It was written with some humor. There's some interesting data there. And section 532 is file type specific options that will help you with your particular type. We're going to look at that just for XTF today. But the second most popular type is JSF data. And we have support PDFs that go into even more detail than the user guide specifically about those types of files. So there are a number of places in addition to this video where you can get really good help on how to import files. Alright, let's scroll back up here and see what we've got for section 3. I just want to review that you've got some excellent support in the user manual for base maps, the different types. We support dozens and dozens of different types of map chart format. So it's really got a diverse support system here. We use Global Mapper inside SonarWiz, and whatever Global Mapper supports, we're going to support that too. I mentioned that it's georeferencing here. What we're trying to do is put your chart in a position on a map where you've got a project, and you're going to have to get a map from NOAA or some other organization that's specific to a location. And we're going to be bringing in a TIFF map, TIF format, and it has a companion file that goes with it called TFW. And it is a file that says, where is my chart located? So let me open up that chart right now and give you a look at that. I've got some sample data in a chart folder, and here are the 3 files that you would typically have with your chart. This one doesn't show, this is my TIFF format file. Doesn't show the extension because it's familiar to the system. The TFW, I'll click on that and see if I can open it with Notepad. See if there's a way I can do that. Yeah, I can open it. So your TFW is a companion file that just has a little bit of information in here, and this is described in the user guide. I believe this is the top left corner, the positions in the XY coordinates, and it's got some scale information. You don't really have to understand that much, except to know that you're looking for a TIFF file, and if your TIFF file is not there, you try to import a TIFF without the TFW, then it's not, the SonarWiz is not going to know where to put it. So let's give that one a shot. There are a couple of ways to import a map like that. One is to select on Map on the Project Explorer on your left side. Very conveniently, you can select Map Manager or Add Base Map. And we'll do that today, since it's so convenient. The other way is up in your post-processing, and oh, here it is, Maps, and then Add Base Map. So in many cases, there are more than one way to do something in SonarWiz. When you open Add Base Map, it's going to give you a browser window. So we'll close that, and we'll try it this way. Map Manager. I'm going to add a base map. And again, I happen to put it in here in my project, if I can find that project. Side scan import is right at the top. And inside there, I just by habit put it into the GeoTIFF folder. So you can find yours wherever you put it. And select your base map. So I've imported it. It says there is one, but I don't see it. Now this is something that happens, and it's very frustrating and confusing for the first time, you know? You look at this and you say, what happened? And you call up support or you send us an email. And we really don't mind answering questions like this. If it was easy enough to use for everyone, then we wouldn't have a support group, but we really enjoy helping people. Okay, let me look at some of these menu bar items have reference information. When you hover the mouse over it, it'll show you something about that. I'm going to suggest clicking on this Fit View to All. Fit View to All is kind of a way to find whatever it is you're supposed to be displaying. So you're sort of telling SonarWiz, maybe this is not at the right scale or the right position, so find my data please. And it's one of these very handy sort of compass icons. Fit View to All can really help you find your stuff. Now even this, I really can't read it, and I'm going to use another menu bar item. I'm going to look for the plus and minus magnifying glass. You just click it a few times and you can start to read it. Okay, now it looks like a chart. Yerba Buena Island, I know where I am. I'm in San Francisco Bay. So I like that. So when you close the map, you can turn it off just by closing the checkbox on the left side. Turn it on and off like that. If you decide to see your data without the base map, just turn off that map or turn off all the maps. If you had multiple maps, this checkbox would close it. Now I'll leave it on, and we're going to go on to side scan import. So I'll select post processing import, select side scan, and I can import any type of data. Let's see what I've got here. I'm looking at a sample data set that was in a different folder than I wanted to use, so I'm going to change folders, and let's see if I can find my SonarWiz projects and the project that we're looking for again. Side scan import. And you know what? I put my data into the XTF folder of the project. It's a convenient place to put it, and I have 5 lines. And if you want to send your project into us, it's very convenient to zip the folder, the project folder, and have it contain your Sonar data already. I'll select one of the lines, and I just want to review some of the specific options that are XTF characteristics with all these different types of files you can import. Some of them have variations that you needed to have import control for various users. The first one I want to mention is your cable out data. Sometimes the data you're importing in side scan, it's not exactly at the position of the navigation data. You have had a cable and a towfish maybe 50 meters behind the ship, and the navigation data might come from the GPS antenna, which is up in the front of the ship. So the couple of things to adjust in there, one of them would be the cable and the other the sheave position. But let's just say that you have no idea which one is which. It might have been put in the layback value or the cable out value in the XTF file. You'd import it twice. Import once this way, once that way, and look at the file when you've imported it. Even before we import that, we're going to take another way to look at the file. The Tools section is really helpful. Tools allows you to look at a file before it has been imported and extract the navigation data. And I'll go up one here and then down into my XTF folder and show you what you can look at before you've even imported your file. Okay, so there's a miscellaneous folder in your project that contains a CSV format. This is something that can open in Excel. And this represents some of the numeric data in your file. This is really good. What I see here is latitude, longitude, and it agrees with my project location. Sometimes you'll see XY data here, or northing and easting, and you'll need to be a little bit more specific about how you tell SonarWiz to import the file. We've got date and time and a ping number and navigation position. Those are all the essential parts of an imported file, as well as your Sonar data. I look over here in column O and I see that it does have cable out. So we'll show you probably in more detail in a different video how you apply cable out, but just because it's in your file doesn't mean it's going to show up into your project. You have to pull it in, be sure you've read it into your CSF format, and then you have to apply it. So I want to refer you to a second video that's specific to cable out and layback. But for now, we'll just know that we have seen it, it's in our file, and we're going to check for our particular import, did we read it into the CSF file. I'm talking about two different formats here. CSF is the compact Sonar file format, and it's the type of file that is representing your data when it's imported into SonarWiz. So we're going to make a lot of changes today, adjusting the data, but what gets adjusted is the CSF file. Your XTF file is out there on your folder and it's sacred. We don't change that. We import it and transform it into a CSF file and make all the changes on that. So let's go back and go to the import side scan, and we'll actually pull one of these files in. Look, it jumped back to that other set of data that I wasn't importing yet. Okay, here's my demo and my XTF. And I'll tell you one thing I like to do is bring in one file at a time. You might have a good sense that your data is all high quality. You might have hundreds of lines. One of the good things to do at the very beginning of the project is bring one or two of the lines in first and watch your output message log. So we'll do that. We'll click on that and I'll say open. And what we're going to look at is down here in this green area. You can see a progress bar going by as the import happens. It was 250 megabytes. It takes something like 10 seconds to bring it in. My SonarWiz GUI is set up, and here's how you find that. You'd say View, Post-Processing Views, and on the left side I've got the Project Explorer, and then the output message log is the other option I wanted to show you. I always look at this. It's like looking at the numbers. I had a good statistics professor in grad school, and he said, always look at the numbers. Don't assume good things about your data. So you can see down below in this green area, it's showing numerical values, the maximum. This is 16-bit data coming in. So if your data were coming in and it was like ranging from 0.1 to 1, it's very, very tiny data. And numbers from 1 to 472, that's pretty good. That's pretty good data. And we should be able to see the line. I actually don't see the line. Oh, there it is. I'll select it by left click. And I'm not really a fan of the gray palette. I know a lot of people use it, but under your view and then data type, we're going to show channels 1 and 2, and we're going to select the palette for the data type that you've got displayed there. I'm going to change it to a light orange brown. It just shows up better. I want to zoom in on that just to look at an area that I think is of a lot of interest, and I'll select there is a rectangle that I can do. Just go around the rectangle and it zooms to that section. So you can do that, or you can click on the plus and minus. If I don't like the way it's centered, I'll right click to clear the previous choice, and I'll use the hand icon to move it. So I want to move those two apparent sunken vessels into the center. And I think that's a good idea. Now, another thing that you'll do when you do side scan data is review your data. There are a couple of ways to review it. You can look at it in the map view like this, or if you right click, you select your line and right click. Let's see. Or I can do it this way. I'm going to open up the lines, show the line, and then right click. And I get this menu that I like a lot. This menu has a whole bunch of important data for you. One is properties. We're going to just look at this XTF file and see what the properties are. This is a lot of information, but the significant point that I want to point out is number of pings. Okay, I've got 12,000 pings. It's 16-bit data, and it's 2,400 samples per channel. Now you'll see here where it says samples per channel, that's what I brought in. So there's been a downsampling. This is called a cross-track downsampling. And we'll go back and review that in the dialog, how you have a choice of that. We brought in channels 1 and 2, so it's low frequency. And the import gain was 1. This just happens to be perfect data. You don't have to adjust the gain at all. And the cable out range here is 0 to 70. And we saw a number 33. So we know that this value goes at least from 33 up to 70. And it's good that we're seeing this number here. This means that the choice we made did bring in the cable out to our CSF file. So to use that, you'd apply layback, and you can do it when the data has come in to the CSF file. Let's look at the control that you have too of something. Oh, I'll close that. When you want to display less than the full amount of your sonar data, it's a nice control to have. Let's say we wanted to trim off the outer 5% or so. This is called adjusting the displayed range, and it says the full swath is 75 meters, so that means 75 starboard and 75 port. I'm gonna drop it down, and let's say it's 10 meters, and see what our data looks like. You're not going to see very much data, but just in case you wanted to reduce the view of a particular line of your data, you can do that. So we'll go back to what it was. We'll say display full. NOAA has a guideline for displaying the range, and it's I forget what it is, something like 8 or 12%. When you get down to a certain depth, then you're supposed to narrow the range to reflect what high quality sonar you'd collected. So you can do that too. In this case, I guess it was a nice high altitude which was used for surveying, so they didn't have to reduce it at all. But if you use that NOAA setting and you were at a lower depth, it'll show you less data for a range. Let's see, I want to give you a look at some other color settings too, just in case you ever have a choice. Here's rainbow, brown, MS2 brown. I'm going to show you some other things you might want to change too. Suppose you like the color, but you're not sure if that's exactly the right vividness that you want. You've got a lot of control with these settings up here in the top right. Palette compress, contrast. You've got hue control. It's easy to make it go from red to green. And saturation and brightness. So you can really change your displays if you don't like exactly the way it is displayed. When you're going to export your data, it will show up the way you have colored it in your mosaic. So make it the way you look. Make it the way you like, rather, and you should be able to get a good display. Alright, let's zoom in here and say that we were looking for Rex. And one thing we want to do is capture a contact. So I'm going to look for the target icon here and click on capture. When we do a capture like that, it jumps to a secondary display of the data. And this is called the waterfall display because the data is presented up and down instead of at whatever heading orientation it was recorded. And you can scroll up and down like that. And when you see the contact and you want to identify it, you left click on the contact. By default, it's called contact 000. Contact capture is one of the most common things you'll do after having recorded and displayed your sonar data and brought in all your lines. I'm just bringing in one line and showing you one contact to give an example. When you want to see the list of contacts that you've got, you would go to post-processing and contact manager. And there we go, we have one contact. you can make a report of that and click on Report Generator, and you'll get an image of your contact, lots of description information of where it is. And you can see how a report would be very helpful as a summary of your side scan data, in addition maybe to the exported imagery that you generate. Okay, let's bring in the rest of our data and have a mosaic, or a strip of 5 lines adjacent to each other. So I'll go back to Import Side Scan, and I'll show you how you can do a group. I'll click on one and then go to the bottom, and I'm holding down the Shift key, just like if you're selecting a selection within a document. Hold Shift, click at the borders, and I've got all 4 lines, and then I'll say Open. Because that one line came in okay, that the settings I'm using seem okay, we're going to go ahead with that. Down here, I wanted to review that we have an option to go with 2400 line samples per channel. We could have gone with 2048. It's really up to you if you do this. If you want to get a tiny bit higher resolution in your data display and your TIFF exports, this might be worth it. The trade-off is that it's going to take a little bit more processing time the more points you have. If you have a 400 line mosaic, for example, and it's not necessary to see things at a 10 centimeter resolution, you might want to bring it in at 1024. So you can think about that. I'll bring in all of these other 4 lines again at the 1024 resolution. I've looked at it myself, and I don't see a huge amount of difference in the resolution visually in this particular data set. But it's something for you to look at and decide. It's nice to have the option. You can see when you have maybe 4,100, 5,000 samples per channel that may be bringing it in at 4096. It's going to give you a better resolution than 1024. And if you just have a few lines in a project, 10, 20 lines, you might want to do that and get the best resolution for your customer. Here you can see the approximate time I'm getting, 240 to 410 megabytes. And it's 15 to 30 seconds to import a line. So doing a project with hundreds of lines, you can see it's going to take some time. I will look at the output message log after this, and we'll see if we can find any red errors. See any messages that are green or going along, that's fine. If there's something that should be noted or thought about, you'll see that usually is indicated in red. So we've got some red lines here, and I just want to let you know what that means. A time gap error can happen, and SonarWiz, in fact, with our time constant for coarse smoothing, it's going to smooth those out, so they really won't be visible in the data. But they happened, and it's a place where maybe you went under a bridge and there was a small gap in time where navigation wasn't coming in, and the data will not have as accurate position in that case, but it's still going to work. So you'll have to have a sort of quality threshold for yourself and decide. Now look at this map that I've shrank the output message log. I looked at it for a while, and when I put it back, my data doesn't show up very well. So we already talked about the fit to view. The other one that's really useful is fit to Sonar, and this will fit the fullest extent of a view from your Sonar data, not the map. And I'm going to click on that and see it's got the top position and the bottom position are the limits of the Sonar data. You can see that this one had some turns in it. I think myself, if I was doing this, sometimes you might see something serendipitous in a turn, but other times you might not want to have that turn in there. So let's just practice on trimming a line here. If you decide you do want to trim it, you can see that you move a mouse and you can trim a line. And I think if I redisplay it, there's a redisplay icon here somewhere. Oh, there we go. It's redisplayed, and so it doesn't show the part that I trimmed. I want to let you know that's still in the CSV file. and it's also still in your XTF file. It just isn't displaying it. We'll take another example and pretend we want to trim this one, and I'll say trim that. Well, we'll trim away like half the line. Okay, so I'm saying yes, I want to trim that. And I think if I trim it and then click somewhere in the map view, it shows me the data has been trimmed away. Another useful function is if you have a sonar line that doesn't have a complete and perfect transition from one line to the next. There's a little line section here. Let's see if I can find it. No, I don't see it. Yeah, I don't see it right now. I thought it was, I thought we were able to make a couple of adjacent lines. Yeah, I'll have to show you that at a different time, where it says get rid of tiny interfile gaps. And I know I've seen that before, but I just don't see it right now. So we won't show that. Okay, what other functions are important here? Let's say we pick one line. I'm going to pick this one down below, and you know that one's actually, because I want to demo that, I want to isolate it. So I'm going to select isolate. Isolate turns off all the other lines and allows you to focus on one line. So I'm going to take a look at that one, and the function I want to look at was settings for adjusting the gain. This line actually happened to come in perfectly. I think before we do gains, we would want to bottom track it, so we'll do that. You would right click on that line and say bottom track. Bottom tracking is a step for side scan processing that is in the file manager, and you can click track it, and you have a blanking period, a duration, and a threshold. Let's just try it. And that didn't work perfectly, but I'll increase the threshold just a little bit. That was a little too much. So you can see that what we're doing is trying to guide SonarWiz to pick what looks like the bottom of the seafloor. And I'm scrolling down the rest of the file to see if there are other decision points that I disagree with. That looks perfect. So then I'll click Starboard, and I'll say save. Okay. We'll close that. We're going to go to Tools here and go to CSF. Again, this is the file that's internally formatted as a result of whatever stage of post-processing we're at. I'm going to convert it to a CSV file, and I'm going to have to go up to the CSF folder and choose it, and I will choose the line 1. And this is not particularly user-friendly. It doesn't tell you that it did the output or where it is. So I'm going to close down that and try to find my file. I think I'm in the XTF folder of my project here. So I'll go to my project, I'll go to my CSF folder, and then I'm looking for the Excel file that has the same name as my CSF file. So this is the CSV file. And look at all the data we've got in there. This is showing you what SonarWiz has for a range. It's got the starboard and port X settings. So it's got a position in both latitude, longitude, as well as for the ship and for the fish, and for the starboard and the port. The data that you're seeing here, these latitude, longitude values, they're not going to incorporate layback. This is something you should think about. If you want to export this data into some other system and use that data, the navigation data, this data that you're seeing in the CSV file does not have the layback in it. It does have altitude. Altitude was added when we did the bottom tracking. But if you want the data with layback, it's far out here in columns AK and AL. This is, I believe it's corrected fish position, and it's the X and the Y. So this is good data for exact fish position if you needed that data exported. Okay, let's close that out. No, I didn't want to save my changes. And see if I can open SonarWiz again. Great. So one of the things we did here was clicking on settings. The other I want to show you is Sonar File Manager. When you're managing a batch of files, it's really nice to have a way to instruct SonarWiz to do the same thing. Like say we had layback. Well, we'll do layback as an example. On line 1, we're going to set up layback. We'll say layback is 100% of cable out. So whatever cable out was, please use it. And for an algorithm, please use cable percentage. Okay. Now we don't have to do that on every line. Say you have 200 or 300 lines. Make like selected function in the Sonar File Manager is really convenient for doing that. We're going to select layback. Let me find it here. Layback settings, and up top it says reference file is line 1 where we turned it on. Files to modify, we're going to say do all of them. I'm going to turn off one since it's already been done, and I'll say OK. Bingo! Look at that. So the Sonar File Manager is a way to duplicate your functions all over a set of files and give you a batch control and save time. It's a really great way to save time. Now in another video we'll show a demonstration of how your line would have changed. You can add layback and you can actually then refresh the screen after you've done that, and you'll see your line jump, which is really cool. Alright, just to isolate that line a little more, we're going to turn off the map. And there you go. So if you wanted to export your data with no background, this is a cool way to do it. I'll just cover export briefly here. We'll take that line as an example. We'll do save project as GeoImage. So it's post-processing, export, and save project as GeoImage. This is great for an individual line. The line comes out just the way you have it drawn at the same scale in your map view. It opens up a dialog like this. Your data have been downsampled to 8-bit numeric resolution actually, so it's 0 to 256 for sonar amplitude. And so if you're only exporting the sonar data, you may as well use 8-bit for the color resolution. If you're including a base map, you might want to go to 24 or 32-bit. And based on the size of your data and how much resolution you want, you can go down to something like 0.05 meters per pixel. It's totally up to you. As you go to higher resolution, you'll have a larger file and you'll export that. And I think by default it looks like it's going out to my GeoTIFF folder. Another way to export is let's pull these other lines in. I will check them and show the other lines. Suppose you have a larger set of lines. In many cases, if you have dozens and hundreds of lines, a single export image won't really give you the resolution you want. So we've given you a sort of a batch export mode where you can export individual tiles. I'll do an export example here. Let's say I want a set of tiles that are, oh, before I do that, we'll use the measurement tool. If I can find it up here, yeah, it's my measure. Let's just see how big is this. So I'm looking at about 1,500 meters by 1,800 meters. So if I went with something like 250 meters per tile, that would give me a lot of tiles, but not too many. So I just wanted to use that measurement tool here, the little tape measure, to get an idea of how big this export mosaic will be. Okay, so we're going to say save mosaic as tiles, and we're going to do preview. And we'll set it up with a tile height of 250 and a tile width of 250 meters. And we'll click preview, and we're just going to take a look at it and see what it looks like. Did I click preview? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, cool. So what we've got here is a shape file, and you can export this also. And you can see this is a really nice small set. It's not thousands of tiles. I don't like to challenge the software and say, give me 2,500 files, you know. if you have too many tiles, you actually take a risk of running out of memory or something like that. So give it a number of tiles such that you got between a dozen and 100 tiles, and cover your mosaic. And then when you export them, each one is an individual TIFF, and each one is georeferenced, so it can be imported into something secondary like ArcMap. So you get the shapefile if you want it, it's an option, and you get all of those individual tiles. Some of the other options you've got here, I just want to let you know you can export side scan files to 3D, and that's a really cool function. Batch image export is a way of taking the individual lines of your survey and presenting each one in a TIFF export or file type of your choice. But it's a vertical format, so it's like north-south orientation, and it individually separates the lines for you. So it's not a mosaic. This is a batch of individual lines exported. Okay, let me go back here and look at another tool that I think is really interesting, especially, let's see, we're going to get rid of that shape file. I want to show you the grid and contour. Grid and contour is a really nice function. We're going to try to generate one here, where you can take a variable like altitude, and we just computed altitude by bottom tracking one line. We're going to bottom track all 5, so we can do an altitude, grid, and contour across all of them. It's kind of a nice function to do. Let's see if I can get the Sonar File Manager. If I can get the Sonar File Manager here, I'll find it under Post-Processing and File Manager, and see if I can batch bottom track. 2, 2, 6, and let's see if we can track the selected lines. This might not actually be optimal. I'm not verifying it, but just for a demo here, we're going to do that. And now they've all been bottom tracked. When you look in the mosaic list over here in the Project Explorer, when the lines are bold, they've been bottom tracked. And so this is good. All right, now we're going to go to Grid and Contour under Tools, and we will select all of the lines, and I'm going to go with a 5-meter grid interval, and we're going to grid altitude plus depth center. So altitude is from your sonar line, your sonar towfish, down to the seafloor. That's the altitude of the towfish. And sensor depth is how deep was your towfish. So let's say the sensor depth was 20 meters, and the altitude varies all over the place. Then you're going to get something like 30 meters plus or minus 5 meters all over the grid. And it gives you a really nice view of your data. It gives you a sense of the depth. It's about as good as you can do with side scan in terms of getting depth. If you want to see a little bit more detail, like if you had the EdgeTech 4200, this may be as good as you can do. If you have an EdgeTech 6205, this is an interferometer. It's going to collect bathymetry data, very accurate data. And with SonarWiz, you get backscatter, which looks a lot like side scan, but it's highly accurately placed, as well as getting the bathymetric data. So there are some good things to give you an option in the future, in addition to your side scan data processing, if you ever consider renting or buying an interferometer. All right, we're going to see how long it takes to generate this. The gridding and contour engine will overlay. It looks to me like 5 meters is a little bit too sparse. I don't exactly see a great, I'm going to get rid of the sonar data. It's not very, I think a very good contour. Let's try that again. We're going to go again with, we'll try 1 meter contour interval. I hadn't done that in a while. I hadn't remembered that it actually doesn't look that great. Okay, so we've generated the same overlay, and this is our data. And it's a little bit hard to see the overlay of the grid and contour, so we're going to change that color. I'll show you how to do that. With the map manager, we're going to turn one of these off. I think that's the one. Yeah. You're going to do a left click to select your item, and then a right click to get the map manager. And our altitude sensors contour file is a shape file. It's an overlay, and it has default color. So I'll click on default, and I'm going to turn it into red. And it's a little bit easier to see there. We're going to put red, and we're going to change the color of the sonar. I'm going to put back my latitude longitude grid. I'm going to change the sonar to gray, and you'll see that your red grid and contour. It looks like I could go even a little more detail there. I'm going to go to, I think I'll go to 1/2 meter. Let's see if we can do a grid and contour with 1/2 meter. So this is kind of what you do in post-processing. You just iterate. Take your data and see what you got, and redo it if you don't like what you got. It keeps asking me, do I want to overwrite the same file name? Okay, that's better. That's better. And I will again change that. See, I have to turn these guys off. And I'm going to change that one to red. And that'll be our final change. Okay, so we've got sonar data, and gee, is that really my gray data? It's hard to see. Take a look at that. The gray palette just doesn't really show up too much. I have to go in a little bit closer. Yeah, something strange going on there with my sonar data now. And that sort of thing happens. You know, once in a while you get into a situation that's very unusual. And I might go back and re-import that data or something like that. So let's see, there was something else I wanted to show you. Yeah, I wanted to show you, just going back to the folders. Let's go back up to our project. I'll go to this PC, I'll find my project again, and show you what we brought in. So all the changes we're working on today, they were inside the CSF folder. This is where all of our CSF file data goes. You can see a BTK file. This is created for an individual CSF file when you bottom tracked it. And there's one other thing I want to review. If things did not work well, if you imported your data and you didn't see it, here's something to try. Sometimes you think that your data is in channels 1 and 2, but in XTF we've seen it where somebody records data and all they have is high frequency data, and you've got to select channels 3 and 4. So let's bring in one of these lines and we'll import channels 3 and 4 and see what that looks like. So it's going to overlay in the same position, but it will have a different file name. You'll see that the CSF file coding or the file name will help tell you which channels you're looking at. Okay, so I'm going to turn those off, and the one we're looking at is high frequency data, and I'll go back to the channels 3 and 4 now and select bronze palette and take a look at that data in a little bit more detail. I will select bottom track and we'll get a very detailed view. Wow, wow, look at that data. And I'll say port and standard, port and starboard, and save it. And then let's pull it up again in what's called a Digitizer view. This is the view when you're capturing contacts. You can also be just examining the data. And look at the beautiful view there. There are two ways to look at this data in the Digitizer view. I should let you know that you've got a choice here. If you're using Windows 7, Windows 8, with Windows XP, you only have the old non-virtual image control. And this is a static image, JPEG image that was created of your data. And you can scroll up and down. It's just not quite as much detail. You have some limitations. I think if we uncheck that, we can look at the data, and I think if I hold down Shift, going up and down. If I hold Control and I roll the mouse, you can zoom. So you have more controls with the new virtual image control. Let's see if we can find that rec. Whoa! Look at that rec. Wow. That's pretty cool. So this is the rec we were looking at before, and it just seems closer and a little bit more vivid in the virtual mode imaging. And you can see if you're rolling down with the mouse through your data, you can get a really good idea of what's under the ocean there. So that's all we have for today. I want to thank you for watching Chesapeake Technologies training video on how to import side scan sonar data into your SonarWiz project. I want to recommend that you follow up with the XTF specific PDF, and we also have a JSF specific PDF. I'll see if I can find those for you here. This document is created and it's available on the support site under SonarWiz. We'll go back here. Under the SonarWiz 5 section of your login, you click on SonarWiz 5 and it will come up and it'll give you the available software downloads, and many of these are for older users, and not the current software. The top is always the most current, but below that we've got some utilities, and we've got some user manuals, and then technical notes. And the XTF import file is the one I was referring to. There's a companion for JSF2. When you open this up, it will help you with some really detailed views of what can go wrong when you're importing your XTF file and what to do about it. So I want to recommend that as follow-up reading. Thanks for watching our video today.